Okay, so some very interesting news is circulating in the ice hockey world. The IIHF is considering lifting the ban on Russia and Belarus. Now, they will be holding meetings on the 3rd and 4th of Feb, so 2 weeks' time, as I'm recording this video, and the proposal will be put towards IIHF members to vote upon. Now, this could allow participation at next year's Olympics. That doesn't mean it's guaranteed, because the IOC would also have to have their own meetings in regards to Russian and Belarusian participation at the 2026 Games. It could also be a catalyst for other governing bodies of international sporting governing bodies to also lift their bans. That'd be like World Rugby, the International Rugby League Board, in both codes of rugby, for example. The IOC, which would be key in allowing Olympic participation, because the IIHF and IOC have to work hand in hand in regards to the Olympic ice hockey tournament. FIFA, UEFA, you get where I'm getting at here. This could become a catalyst for the other major governing international sports bodies lifting bans as well. Now, I can only think of two other occasions where a nation is banned from international competition, which also bans their athletes from international competition. And that was South Africa during apartheid, when there was a lot of pressure put on the then minority white government to end apartheid and become a multi-democratic, fully open state. And the former Yugoslavia at Euro 92, they were thrown out because of the turmoil, which ultimately led to the Croatian and Bosnian conflicts within the former Yugoslavia, and they were replaced by Denmark. So they're the only two examples I can think of a nation, and therefore its athletes being not allowed to compete at international level. Whereas the IOC ban on Russia because of the doping scandal meant that Russia, the athletes couldn't compete under the Russian banner, but they could compete under the International Athletes IOC banner. So the athletes weren't banned if they had never tested positive, but the nation was, and they were suspended from being a member of the IOC. So not a full ban, but a ban nonetheless. The other things we've seen are boycotts. So the 1980 Olympics was boycotted by the US because of the Soviet invasion and involvement in Afghanistan, and then the Soviets 4 years later in 84 boycotted the US Games in LA, basically to say, well, you didn't want to show up to our one, we're not going to show up to yours. But they weren't banned. Other nations have also boycotted Olympics, lesser nations like El Salvador, for example, over cost. But when it comes to an international ban, I can only think of Yugoslavia, the former Yugoslavia, which is now multiple different independent states, and South Africa under the apartheid regime. So it's very, very rare that international sport basically says to a nation, you're not allowed to compete. Now, with Yugoslavia, obviously that was the internal civil strife and civil conflict. And with South Africa, it was internal policy. It wasn't foreign policy of either nation that got them banned, which I find very, very interesting, that the two previous bans were for a nation's internal domestic policy, or in Yugoslavia's case, that's just the complete breakdown of law and order and just brutality for the next 5 years. South Africa was apartheid. Here it's because of foreign policy. Now, Russia, or the Soviet Union, wasn't banned from competition in 1979 with the invasion of Afghanistan. The US wasn't banned in 91 with the invasion of Iraq, or for that matter, for the invasion of Afghanistan in 2001, or the invasion of Iraq in 2003, which were US-led political and military involvement. No. So I find this one interesting, that we're meant to be all angry and upset. This is where I don't like political pressure being put and meddling in sport. We've seen it a lot in more recent years, especially during the COVID pandemic as well. And this is a danger, is when political pressure and media pressure puts pressure on governing bodies to do something, when they're meant to be non-political and they're meant to organise and structure tournaments and events and leagues, and they're meant to be politically neutral. There was a lot of pressure not only put on the IIHF, but the IOC, FIFA, World Rugby, the International Rugby League Board, and World Cycling. Various governing bodies had a lot of pressure put upon them. And suddenly now there seems to be a thawing of that pressure. Could this be a catalyst for the other major, sports governing bodies to go the same way? We shall see. But ice hockey is big business in Russia, and it's also big business for the IIHF, because some of the best players like Ovechkin and Malkin and Panarin are Russian. And fans want to see the best players play at the World Championships and Olympics, if at all possible. And it would be kind of cool as an ice hockey fan to see Malkin and Ovechkin have a go at a gold medal. They have been denied in 2022 because of COVID and the COVID protocols that the Chinese government had in place, which made the tournament basically nigh impossible to also fit in with the NHL's schedule. And in 2018, the IOC, the IIHF and the NHL could not come to an agreement about NHL player participation. So the last two Winter Olympics, Ovechkin and Malkin, Panarin have missed out. Shesterkin, for example, some of the best Russian players we've ever seen, have missed out on the last two Winter Olympics, and the NHLPA and a lot of the players were deeply frustrated with not being allowed to go in 2018. Ovechkin was one of those players who very publicly criticised the decision not to allow players to represent their country at the Olympics who were playing with NHL contracts. And in 2022, he's a key member of the NHLPA, as a very senior player. Again, was highly critical of how that was all discussed and organised. So, big name players, I think, are also putting their opinion into this. And a lot of fans are putting their opinion into this. Now, we can agree or disagree on the political standpoint and the international bans that Russia and Belarus have had for the last couple of years, the last 3 or so years. We can agree and disagree on the pros and cons and whether it's right or wrong. There's going to be no 100% agreement. But it's very, very rare for a nation to be banned from international competition. As I say, it's only happened twice before that I can think of. Now, there may be other examples, but it's only happened twice before. And it was for basically internal policies of the countries involved. This is because of foreign policy of the countries involved. It does smack of a lot of hypocrisy, where certain nations seem to have put a lot of pressure on governing bodies to act a certain way, and the media, and it smacks of political interference. But we shall see what the IIHF decide to do, and of course, when Russia play well, that actually helps TV ratings, sponsorship, money. And money is a big factor. Without Russia being at, and even to a certain extent Belarus not being at the World Championships and not potentially being at the Olympics, could actually hurt the Olympics as well, because they want to be as profitable as possible, make as much money as possible. Could also help the World Championships be a profitable tournament as well, because they're a big draw because of big name players. So we shall see what happens in 2 weeks' time. Watch this space is all I'm going to say on that. Watch this space. It's going to be very, very interesting what the outcome of any vote is. And I have a funny feeling the IIHF is going to lift their ban on Russia and Belarus competing. I really, really do. But that's enough from me waffling. Place your thoughts on the fact the ban still is in place, and what do you think the IIHF do? And this does not guarantee participation at next year's Olympics or next year's World Championships either, but it does sort of pave the way. The World Championships looks more likely, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee. They are considering the proposal, and we shall see what the outcome is. But it could, as I say, be a catalyst for a much bigger change in the position of many sporting governing bodies lifting bans or considering their position. And it still says to me that there's still some political pressure being put on the IIHF by various governments. As I say, since the ban's been in place, several major members of the IIHF domestically have had elections. We've got new presidents and prime ministers, including in the US, here in the UK, Italy, just as 3 examples. And they are key members of the IIHF at the top table. And there could be, again, political pressure on the IIHF to sort of thaw the relations in order to pave the way for a political settlement between Ukraine and Russia and a ceasefire. They've been using this as a soft power ploy, which was used on South Africa to great effect between the 60s and the 80s. It actually helped contribute to speed up the end of apartheid, because South Africa, sports mad nation, Russia, ice hockey, big business. And if they can sort of break those barriers down, it could be a thawing of political relations. But I try and keep politics off the channel, but in this case, very difficult to do so. But thank you very much for watching, and I'll have some more content for you guys very, very soon.